I'd now like to introduce Dev Aditya, Managing Director and AI Lead at Ottoman's Institute. He'll discuss the influence of AI in conversations and languages, highlighting AI's ability to create lifelike conversations and teach diverse subjects. Aditya, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's obviously a very interesting gathering that we have today. Perhaps what I am going to be speaking about is going to be slightly different from what a lot of people have been speaking about, but I think it is equally important. So without further ado, with your permission, I will start today's talk. I think to begin this talk, it is increasingly important to really address the day, time, and the age that we are in today. For the first time ever, in the history of this world and in the history of humankind, for over hundreds of thousands of years, there is something out there that has so-called conquered human language, as we know it. Prior to this, there was nothing that conquered or ran the human language. And to be honest, it is the human language that is the absolute stepping stone of everything that we have achieved as a race. The civilizations that started with the paintings in the caves, to big civilizations in Persia and then in Rome, and to modern day human race. So for the first time, we have something that is almost equally as good as us and growing rapidly that understands language. So let's take a deep breath to appreciate this. And let's also listen to what I have to say with an open mind. Because although this is the first time we have something alien that understands and almost speaks our language, it is something that we created. And it is perhaps the next stepping tool for us to use that same language to better all of us in society. So today I will be talking to all of you about how we can use AI in linguistics and translations, not only for spoken language, but also for sign language. So let me just start with this entire piece of translation. Obviously, the first and foremost player in the translation space was a human being. If I was speaking in English to somebody who only understood French, we would probably have a human translator supporting us. We would have to find that person, pay for the time of that person, and create an ecosystem and a space and a place where such conversations could happen. Then obviously, with modern technology, we have had translation systems, right? Everybody knows Google Translate, for instance. And that was fairly good at what it did, but we also know our frustrations in how it conceived language and how it produced translative outputs. So here I want to talk a little bit about the then versus now. So for me, the then is what we have all grown up with or used at least for the past decade in translation. We've had the Google Translates of the world and other translative systems. Now, these systems relied on a lot of human support. For instance, a system like Google Translate would use millions and millions of sentences previously translated by human beings and make links between those words and sentences and the sentences and words of other languages. It would use a system called NMT. Today, that may not be needed. Another very essential part of the old style of translation is the number of layers that we had. I'll just give you a simple layer mechanism here. You put in something or spoke in English that went through a layer to give you an output. The output was, let's say, in French. So there's already a 3-layer mechanism. But how does a human being translate? It is the same system that takes in input from one language and gives you output in another language without really the layer systems. Today, with generative AI, we can use specialized data sets that can attach onto any existing language model that is in one language and help it understand another language. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. But in essence, what I'm saying is you could have a single layer that is doing most of this work. Similarly, for the first time, you have a system now that can generate the data to train itself. It can generate new sentences and new combination of words, and it can help itself and train itself by doing that. You wouldn't need millions of hours of human arduous labor to improve that system anymore. So my own personal journey begins about a year and a half ago when we started a project whereby we wanted to create an avatar that could translate in real time spoken English into British Sign Language. And when we got into this journey, we started our discovery. So if you just remember, I was talking to you about languages. So English, translation layer, French, right? But when we get into something like sign language, these layers magnify. I'll just give you two examples. In English, I might want to say, I like to make pancakes. But when I sign that, what I'm actually forming is pancakes I make. Similarly, I might want to say throw the ball. But when I'm signing that, what I'm actually signing is ball throw. There is an immense difference in syntax and grammar and sentence formation and grammatical rules between how we sign and how we speak. So now, if we are really trying to use a translation system here, you don't have 3 layers, but you have multiple layers. I'll just give you one example. Let's forget about the input layer, which is what is being spoken. Let's forget about the ultimate output layer. But in between, what we now need to have multiple layers of technology to do is a layer to understand and translate this regular English into the grammar of sign language first, something that we call gloss. Once we have translated this into gloss, now we want to map that gloss to a pose. What's the hand movement? Once we have done that, then we need to take that pose and use technologies. For instance, we've used motion graph technologies to translate that into frames. And then using those frames, finally convert into an avatar that poses the output. That's almost 3x the amount of layers in between this translative system using the old system. That obviously has implications in the amount of time it takes to produce such an output. And I think common sense also tells us that every time we jump a layer, we lose some degree of efficiency. But then the question is, can there be a new way? A way which is more human-like, a way where the same system now understands different languages and provides output accordingly. And I believe this is the case. So we obviously worked in the old style of the work. Now we've entered the generative AI era of the work. And today, with the latest advancements in AI, we can take an existing language in English. Well, most of us would know ChatGPT, right? So we could take, let's say, a ChatGPT 4 model, and we could fine-tune it. What do we mean by fine-tune it? We could give it a small specialized data set, let's say in another language, or let's say in gloss, which is the translation of spoken language into grammar of sign language. We could give it that, and it would be able to understand and reciprocate. It would still reciprocate in English, though. But then you could also have models which can mask the English language, with other languages. And then you can have a two-way multilingual conversation. And all of this simply relies on what we call tokens. And the easiest way to explain what a token is are things that the amount of data of language that has been put in have been divided into. So a simplest example of this is if I'm giving the machine 150,000 lines of data, I might want to take each and every unique word in those sentences and mark them as tokens. So if we have tokens of multiple different languages, of multiple different words, this just becomes simpler. If we are doing this, then you could have a system which is almost as smooth as ChatGPT, where you put in a question, you put in a prompt, and it responds in a different language. The language maybe the other person needs. It can also do so and really compress all of the layers that existed for the sign language and do it in a single layer. Exciting, right? So this is what we can do with traditional generative AI models today. But there is perhaps one more step, the step that I am most excited about. And for this, I want you to imagine a scenario. There are three people standing and trying to communicate with each other. One person only speaks in French, one person only speaks in the English language, and one person speaks in British Sign Language. How would they communicate? Well, you could have one translator who understands all three and who could try and solve this. Or you could have, in most cases, two translators trying to support all three listeners. But today, what we can also do, and perhaps one of the most exciting things of this very moment, is that we can create multiple AI agents, each agent being a specialized form of technology that can support one single thing. So you could have one agent that is a specialist in French, one agent that is a specialist in sign language, one agent that is a specialist in English, and all three of them can communicate with each other and give you the fastest output. This is called the multi-agent theory. And I believe to truly make language accessible for everybody, this is perhaps the closest we can get in the realms of technology to make human language, not regional language, not cultural language, but to make human language a truly universal form of communication by using technology in that sphere. And this technology and this approach is closer than you think, with multiple papers that have already come out on this, and obviously our own work, trying to improve language accessibility. So, what does this actually mean for all of you? Obviously, AI has the potential to revolutionize and democratize how we converse with each other. It can do this at scale, across languages, across areas. And I think the most important thing for somebody who wants to dabble with languages and technology is to understand three main points. It is perhaps the easiest it has ever been to create technology to make language accessible today. And for that, all you need today is a small set of custom data, not millions of lines of data, a small set of custom data that already fulfills the need you want it to do. For instance, English to gloss of sign language or English to French. It is minuscule as compared to what something like Google Translate was made of. Secondly, an existing language model, which you will further train with that data set. You could just take a model like Llama, which is openly available, or you could take and work on ChatGPT itself through the paid platform and GPT builders. And once you have been able to test the output and you're happy with it, all you need to do to make it accessible and to spread it across the world is to give it to all the people who have an internet connection. So, with that, I want to conclude my talk for this evening, and I'm open to any questions that anybody may have.
Oh, Dev, we've got questions for you. Don't worry. Thank you so much for that and the insights. It's really fascinating. We have a question here. You mentioned British Sign Language, yeah?
Mhm.
And we have a question here from Jeremy, who's in our audience. He says, I'm a BSL interpreter and I'm worried, but I wonder if there are too many nuances with BSL to rely on AI, but maybe it will create a more standardized BSL with fewer regional variations. It's a huge one to watch, he says. It's a huge area and it's one to watch. So I just was wondering, if you could respond to the nuances he refers to.
Yeah. So, absolutely. First of all, there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of context, there's a lot of facial and bodily sort of actions as well that need to be picked up because it is a very complex language, right? That is absolutely there. And I don't think AI is going to come here to take the job of a translator. It will just make translation more accessible. I'll give you an example. If it really works out the way we plan it to work out, then you could have British Sign Language users now being able to access podcasts from their home, something they wouldn't be able to get a translator for. Or maybe now watch a Netflix channel because you could have also a digital translator that comes up. For more complex things, you would have the human translator. It is absolutely not there yet, but we need to just treat, I'm going to say just one sentence here. You and me are speaking today, right? Even in this modern language, it's over 150,000 years of evolution. What you're seeing in modern day generative AI today, it's less than 10 years of evolution. So we'll have to give it some time, but the growth is at a very exponential rate, and we'll just have to see what it can do in the space in the next 5 years.
No, definitely. I mean, this whole sort of space of AI and technology, it's exponentially improving. So there's going to be a massive shift in the way our whole society operates and how it's going to impact all areas. I have another quick question. It is from Lynette Reap. She says, I'm familiar with ASL, not BSL, but I assume they are similar in that much of the semantic and syntactic information are not on the hands but on the face. But I think you referred to that already, the posture, the body language, nuances, and the way we interact as humans. And she's just wondering how this would be communicated or interpreted through an avatar.
Within the limitations of my understanding, because I specialize more in British Sign Language, ASL could be slightly simpler for this form of technology because ASL is more rules based than British Sign Language. And touching on the previous question as well, British Sign Language within also this small island has too many variances. So there is a need for a more standardized approach, which ASL is ahead of in the curve. So I think that basically is the answer. And ASL also from a technology point has been worked on from 2012 by an app called Handtalk. So that is absolutely ahead of the curve as compared to any other sign language in the world.
Okay, thank you.